Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Joel Montaniel. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of SevenRooms. We're based here in New York. So SevenRooms is an operations, marketing, and guest engagement platform for the hospitality industry. Our mission is to help hospitality operators make their guests feel at home. And the way you can think about our platform is before, during, and after the restaurant experience. We're helping our operator partners build a direct and personalized relationship with their guests. We leverage data to help drive that experience. Today, we're in over 250 cities. We work with groups like MGM, Cosmopolitan Hotel, Mandarin Oriental. We work with restaurant groups like Michael Mina, Wolfgang Puck, here in the city, Major Food Group. And we're B2B, so you may not have seen us from a consumer point of view, but we really power all of the places you're booking, and we power the host stand. So regardless of how you booked your reservation or if you called in, when you check in at the host stand of any of these places, it's SevenRooms powering that experience.
Awesome. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Wu. I'm the CTO of Compass Digital Labs. My parent company is Compass Group. We generate about $20 billion in food service revenue a year in North America. We have 28 companies that we sell food through, so we own food. Wolfgang Puck Catering, so we do the Oscars, the Golden Globes. We're in higher education, so we do food service in all the universities, like Texas A&M, Northwestern. We're in about 800 hospitals, so we do healthcare, we do patient feeding and retail as well. We're basically in every vertical. We actually do all the food service in Google as well, in Mountain View and in New York. We work with Michael Bacher a lot. So as the CTO of Compass Digital Labs, it's a division that really, how do we drive better food hospitality experiences leveraging digital? We're highly focused in really 4 areas right now, which is, how do we leverage technologies like kiosks, mobile, how do we bring delivery to our consumers, and then finally, how do we bring this friction-free experiences to our consumers? So how do we remove transactions like payment and ordering and make it more friction-free? Obviously, we build a lot of our own products, so like our mobile products and kiosk products we're building today. But we also have an incubator where we work with startups, and we bring them in as cohorts. So we bring these cohorts of startups in, and we invest in them to help solve specific problems. And the lens is really, how do we bring this experience of cafe of tomorrow? And the idea is that some of these companies will fail, and the ones that are successful, we will scale up with them.
Great. Okay. So, I wanted to start off by talking about just, what, in the context of the restaurant industry, what is personalization? I think it's been said a number of times today that that word can mean many different things in many different contexts. So, now we're in the restaurant context, and sort of, what does it mean to you, and how are you seeing this idea of personalization take form right now in food service?
Yeah, I think the simplistic answer for us is it's anything that makes you feel special or warm and fuzzy inside. And we've all had that experience. We all know what that feels like. And I think the interesting thing is it's different for everyone. Not only is it different for everyone, it's different depending on the day or the experience you just had coming into the restaurant. And so the problem we set out to solve when we started SevenRooms in 2011 was when we looked at the systems that the hospitality industry was using to run their business, we saw one big thing missing. And that one big thing missing was guest data. And so we asked the question, how can this industry, which is all about making people feel special, all about making people feel at home, how are they able to do that consistently when the very ingredient you need to do it, which is that guest data, is not available in the systems they're using to run their business? So in short, it's how you make someone feel. And that means making them feel special because you have a bit of information about how to make that experience memorable or meaningful for them.
Making them feel like a regular. And we'll get to how data can help with that in a minute, but go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's, to Joel's point, it's really about delighting our end consumers, right? So the challenge for Compass is really that we're in so many different industry verticals. Nothing's standard for us. Every food location, is different. We spend $200 million a year in terms of construction. We build out spaces. So in terms of personalizing the experience, there's really 3 areas for us. One is spaces. It's interesting, we're at a WeWork location right now. But initially when we spent hundreds of millions building these spaces, we always built them to be beautiful, right? But if you spend some time in these spaces, which we do, we have user experience researchers out there, and what we find is that they start utilizing our space for different different needs while they're eating, right? So they could be eating with us, they could be studying, they could be socializing, they could be playing games, right? So how do you build a space to really enable them to have those experiences while they eat with us? So a lot of things that we do in Compass Digital Labs is, how do we put devices to collect this data to make these intelligent decisions in our spaces? The other area is really food offering. There's a lot of discussion about personalized nutrition. That's something that we would like to focus on as well, but it's a very difficult problem to solve. So going back to some of the basics is really how do we make sure we provide the right food offerings to our consumers? How do we leverage the data to make sure that our restaurants, our cafes have our top items or the most popular items in that space? So an example would be in Cincinnati. I don't know if anyone's here from Cincinnati. It's one of the more unhealthy cities in the U.S., right? So if we look at the type of food behavior there, we would probably pick like a lot of hamburgers and things like that in our space. But one of our clients is Procter & Gamble, and the demographic in that office is actually very healthy. So if you don't leverage the data properly, we'll provide them the wrong food offering, right? And so finally, the third piece that we leverage data on is really about like providing them the right marketing offers, right? So there's really things that happen in the retail space. How do we bring that into our food hospitality space and provide them the right price and the right offers?
Cool. Yeah, so we might as well segue into the data. Data's the word of the day. If data were a drinking game, geez. But yeah, let's talk about restaurants leveraging data and just sort of what are the different types of data they should be looking for? Because there's a lot of technology coming into restaurants right now, in the front of house and in the back of house. There's a lot of data being produced. So restaurants, large or small, what are they supposed to be looking for in order to create that personalized experience for their guests?
Sure. So thematically, when we think about data, and we think about the industry, the first place to start is this industry has always captured data in some way, shape, or form. And the vehicle for capturing that data historically has been in someone's head, or maybe written down on a piece of paper. And so one of the things we think about all the time at SevenRooms is how do you shift from systems of record, which could be someone's head, a piece of paper, to systems of intelligence, which is collecting that data automatically for them and sharing it, to systems of engagement, which is how do you actually make that smart data meaningful and actionable. And so when we started looking at the space, we really looked at what operators were tracking, whether that's in their heads or whether that was written down. And we really break data into three types. There's who you are, so this is profile level data. There's your preference data, so anything that you really care about. And then there's your purchase data. And it doesn't matter if we're talking restaurants, if we're talking general marketing data, that's the holy grail of data. If you have all three of those pieces, you can really tailor the offering or the experience to someone. And so in the restaurant context, what does that actually mean? So the profile data of who you are is your job, your picture, where you live, if you have a family, the things you care about. Your preference data is, do you have allergies? So you have, really it's more than a preference, but your food allergies. Do you prefer upstairs or downstairs? And then your purchase data is actually what are you ordering when you come in? So we integrate with over 45 point of sale to pull that data in automatically. And then going back to that theme of how do you make it and move the industry towards systems of engagement, we have a marketing automation product that crunches all of that data, but uses it in a personalized manner. So one quick example, we have a group here. They have a steakhouse. They have Italian restaurants. We do things like anyone who spends over X dollars, tag them as a regular. For those regulars that have not been back in 60 days that order the lasagna, let's automatically, but personally, so it looks like it's handwritten from the general manager, reach out to this guest, inviting them to come back in, having a complimentary lasagna. We know it's worth it. We know this person cares about it because they order it. And as an example, that campaign, which is automated, in 10 days alone, that generated $2,000 of additional revenue without this restaurant having to have any expertise. And so it all comes back to how do you help them collect it, aggregate it, and then make it useful. And in this industry, it really matters because guests really expect it. So that's the types of data we think about, and then we're always thinking about how do you use it in a way that increases guest experience and then still enables hospitality.
So I mean, I would just add to what Joel says. So in terms of the type of data that we have, it depends on the type of systems that you have at your restaurants or cafes. So predominantly in our cafes, we definitely have point of sale systems. So with point of sale systems, I don't know who you are, but I have purchase data. So I can split you into different market segments to understand behavior. So a lot of the basic things that we do in all these thousands of locations that we have is just making sure our operators and our kitchen staff understands what are your top items. Make sure you stock your top items and stop buying your unpopular items, right? The other piece of purchase data that we can really learn a lot about is attachment rates. So, product A is attached to all these other products. So when they buy product A, there's a huge likelihood of them to buy all these other products. So what happens when you run out of product A? So a lot of times they think they can just find a replacement product to attach it with all these other products. But what we're finding is that when you introduce another product, it has a different attachments to different products. So how do you leverage that data to help your kitchen staff really design their menus and design their products? That's really important. And then if in your account now you have like kiosks or mobile, now you're starting to get more detailed data about your end user. So when we deploy mobile apps that allow users to pre-order pickup or pre-order delivery, we now have specific detail and personalized data on these customers. And so now we can leverage that data and give them specific recommendations, right? But to be honest, where we're really at right now is really at the preference level. When we know you have a certain preference, we can really help you figure out what you want to eat. Think of it as like a filter. If you're a vegan, we're going to make sure we'll provide you with all these right vegan meat menu items, right? One of the biggest problems that we have is that we offer so many different types of menu items, and it creates a cognitive load for a lot of end consumers.
Yeah, well, and that goes nicely into, I think we can't talk about data and restaurant and food service without talking about loyalty programs, because those are obviously huge now, and we're seeing, I think every major QSR chain and quick service or fast casual offering loyalty programs. But as you all see it, is that completely necessary in order to really take the most advantage of all this data that's coming in?
I think historically loyalty programs for hospitality has been a Band-Aid. It's actually a way that operators or technology players have tried to connect properties and data sets that have historically been disconnected. And I don't think that they've really worked. I think everyone, maybe in very, very few cases, have they really worked. But the reason why they haven't worked is because they're one size fits all. So on your 10th visit, you're going to get this for free. Or once you have this many points, you're going to get an appetizer. And the reason why they're that way is because you haven't had the deep level data in terms of purchase and tying the purchase behavior to the profile of actually what you're buying. And so once you have that, and once you use the right technology partners to enable that, you can really rethink loyalty. And loyalty is really one-to-one. It's really, what do you care about? What data do we have that shows that you care about that? And then how do we reach out to you at the right moments in a way that's meaningful to you? And that's where today we think loyalty is really broken. It's too one-size-fits-all. So whether this manifests itself as a new loyalty program or whether this is really more behind the scenes, I think it really depends on the brand and the operator and the consumers. I do think it all comes down to having the right data set to be able to speak meaningfully or interact meaningfully with each guest. And I think it will be more and more important that brands start to move this way because in every other industry outside of hospitality, Amazon, Spotify, Netflix, all of those other services that we're all used to using, they've shown consumers the way that it can be. And so if you look at all the stats, 80% of consumers will do business with someone that personalizes the service for them, which makes it very clear the businesses that do that are going to win, and the businesses that don't will lose. So I think there's a long way to go. We're still in the very early innings of what loyalty can look like. And technology certainly needs to play a role in the hospitality space to get it there.
Yeah, I think loyalty is to drive engagement with your end consumers, right? It helps you collect a lot of data that can help you make better decisions with your consumers. The problem in the restaurant industry or in Compass is that a lot of the accounts or your restaurants, they are small businesses. They don't have the capacity to run loyalty campaigns. That's the only way loyalty is successful. It's actually another marketing channel, right? So that's what, because they don't have the capacity, then what you'll find is you get a lot of these buy 9 coffees, get the 10th one free, right? Because they don't have the capacity to do that. So I think when an entrepreneur or a restaurant owner wants to launch loyalty, they really need to figure out, do they have the capacity and what do they want to do with this extra marketing channel? In the Compass side, obviously we definitely want to launch loyalty across our industries and different industry verticals. We definitely have obviously the manpower to run these campaigns, and we're definitely very interested because the amount of data that we can collect and it will help us make better personalized offers to our consumers, right?
Okay, yeah. And we'll take questions in just a sec, so start thinking about those if you have any. But you did mention smaller businesses and smaller restaurants, and I think, in terms of creating these personalized experiences for customers and really replicating, making somebody feel like a regular, even if they've never set foot in the restaurant, is something that someone with super deep pockets, Starbucks or McDonald's, has the money, has the manpower to eventually execute on. But what about, the 400-something thousand independent restaurants or smaller chains in the United States? What, with this expectation to personalize experiences, what are they supposed to do? How do they manage this sort of evolution that we're in right now?
So maybe I can start. So one is, I think, keep things simple. Like, the interesting part is, even though Compass is a very large organization, every account or every location we run, it's like run like a small business, right? And what you'll find is that if you talk to a lot of the kitchen chefs or the kitchen staff, what they'll say to you is that, hey, I went to school to learn how to make food. I want to provide an amazing experience to my consumers through food. But guess what? I spent 30% of my time making food. I spent 70% of my time looking at data, managing my inventory, managing labor, right? And so, a lot of you out there producing products for the food service industry, you have to understand, when you introduce another technology, that's one more thing that operator has to worry about. Even if it's AI or it's a chatbot or it's a recommendation engine, that's probably like 30 other things that person now has to manage, right? So if you want to talk about making impact in terms of personalization, we have to keep things really simple. The other interesting thing about leveraging data is that, there's a lot of discussion about recommendation engines in our organization. What we find sometimes is when we look at our top 10 products and we do an A/B test and we recommend our consumers the top 10 products, and then we use our personalized data to do recommendations, what we find is that the top 10 products wins. So maybe that doesn't look like it's a personalized experience, but for the end consumer, it's still getting what they want, right? So I do think we need to find, there's a lot of AI discussions and personalized discussions, but how do we keep things simple for the end user or the end operator? So it's that question that you asked is something we think about all the time, and in fact, that really gets to where we want to end up. And I think simplification is key, to Scott's point, and I think simplification in many ways actually means automation. So we always think about the world. We have this saying at SevenRooms: how do we make small big, and how do we make big small? And so if you think about the spectrum of operators, on one side, you have MGM, one of our partners, multi-billion-dollar casino. They have a food and beverage team. They have a food and beverage strategy team. They have a loyalty team. They have a marketing team. They have billions of dollars and all these resources. And then if you think of the independent operator all the other way at the other end of the spectrum, the mom and pop operator, their brothers in the kitchen, the thinking behind SevenRooms is, how do you give that independent operator the same capability set at the push of a button that MGM multi-billion-dollar casino has? And the way you do it is you build and you move the system to that system of intelligence. You remove the need for them to have a marketing team, a loyalty team. You remove the need for them to have to understand how to use the data, and you do it for them. And so we're not quite there yet, but our intention is to make sure we can help every operator. Our really end state is a world where that independent operator has the same tool set that the big guys have. And that's the whole point of technology. I think that's what's so fascinating about this industry right now, is this is an industry where technology can really, really help. And then to Scott's point,
how do we make it, we want to envision a world, how do we make it so the operator only has to focus on food and service? That's it, which is what they're really special at, which is what they're world-class at, and how do we help them do everything else?
Yeah, great. I think we have time for a few questions, if anybody has any. Oh.
I have a quick question for you, Scott. How are you guys dealing with food waste within your operations? How do you guys deal with it when you see it happening, even on the consumer level or in the level where you're preparing? How does that process go about?
So, I mean, food waste happens from farm to fork. We're very much focused right now from, I guess, kitchen to fork, right? So a lot of the food waste that happens for us is because of overproduction, right? A lot of places that we run aren't just restaurants, so it's not made to order. It's not someone ordering food. We have to prepare a specific amount of food in our cafes, right? So overproduction sounds like a negative term, but in reality, it's like you do need a certain amount of overproduction because you never want to run out of food for your consumers, for your customers. The problem is how much overproduction is the challenge for us, right? So we have thousands of locations. We can't tell you easily how much food waste is happening every day because you need, again, your kitchen staff to measure and track it, right? So what we're doing, this is an area, to Joel's point, is how do we automate food waste tracking? How do we leverage something like AI and computer vision to actually recognize the food waste and record how much it happens? Once you have that data, you understand how big of a problem it is across our locations. Then in terms of like minimizing food waste, is now figuring out the right demand forecast model for your account so that you're making the right amount of food. And that's one way to minimize food waste. The other one is just about education to our end consumers. What we found, we did a small test. We just find that when people are throwing their food out in the cafe, we just let them measure the weight of their food waste. And that alone, by educating the end consumers, we find that they also order less. At our Google accounts, actually, in our Google locations, we also give smaller plates because it's all you can eat free food there. And so they just actually take smaller portions so they're not throwing out as much food. These are some of the programs that we're running. Food waste is a very tough problem for us to tackle, and we're trying to tackle it every day right now.
Did you want to add anything, Joel?
Yeah, I would say it's an opportunity that we see as well, and it's a win-win for everyone in the chain. One of the reasons why this problem exists is because, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but going back to the data set in the industry, the purchase information was never tied to the person or the profile information. And so the way restaurants operate, and most do to this day, is, all right, I have 300 people coming in for dinner. How much food should I order? Well, what did I order last week, last month, the same time period? And everything has been based on kind of gut, anecdotal, what you did before. But the reality, and what's most important, is actually who's coming in. And when you have the purchase data connected to the profile data, we can tell them things like, well, 80% of the people coming in you've seen before, they actually are vegetarians. So you probably don't need to order 1/3 fish, 1/3 chicken, 1/3 steak. You should probably order less. So there's so many opportunities to actually smartly use the data where everyone can win. And it's part of what we're focusing on, part of what we're working on. And so, it's becoming more important, of course. And then, there's a world that you can see further out where, if you have all of that data, send some signal to the connected farm that says actually produce less, because New York City, we have data on the next month, and we're not going to need as many potatoes. That's a world that could exist today once you start to connect the data sets.
Actually, just to add to what Joel said, it's very true. Again, our operators, our kitchen staff are so busy. We actually did a pilot last year in New York, actually. What we find is at one of our locations, the kitchen staff was ordering the same amount of food every month because they're so busy, so they just keep ordering the same amount, right? So we did a pilot on baked goods specifically. At the end of each day, they kind of tracked how much they bought and how much they sold. And the next day, we'd give them prescriptive advice on, hey, this is how much of these products that you need to buy. What we found is that the unpopular items, they stock less, so it reduced food waste. But the other thing is that the really popular items, they weren't buying enough of, so they're running out of stock every day. So we're making sure they have more stock of their popular items. So not only did we reduce food waste, we found that we actually drove higher sales and higher margins for ourselves too.
Great. Yeah.
So I think, generally when we're talking about data collection, when we're using free services like Google, we're expecting and we've kind of accepted that our data is getting collected and affects like the ads we see. But in a hospitality setting, like a hotel, you might be coming face to face with the data collected on you more often and maybe not want that. Can people opt out, or do they opt in for the data collection that you guys do?
Yeah, so by doing business with the establishment, you're opting in to give them your data. It is an opt-in to market, though, so that's fully opt-in. You have to opt in for them to reach out to you. We're fully GDPR compliant, all of the privacy provisions, so you can call any restaurant, and this is true for any business, by the way, and tell them, remove my data, and show me proof that you removed the data. So the system is fully built in to support that. And we've had to do those things just based on the type of partners we have, public companies that use our platform. What I think is really interesting that maybe doesn't get as much coverage is actually where hospitality is unique is I think this is actually one of the few industries where people, on the whole, want you to know more. They want you to know more because it's going to impact their experience. And in many cases, if you have an allergy, it could be life or death. And when you mentioned the hotel world, I think we take a lot of cues from the hotel world where some of the nicer hotels or some of the hotels people write stories about, they'll do a roll call at the beginning and they'll say, okay, we have this many guests coming in. John Smith is coming in with his family. He has 2 kids now. His son is 10 years old. His daughter's 13 years old. They're now on the basketball team. They love cookies. They love their pillows this way. So I think hospitality is a really unique place where people actually, if used correctly, want you to know more. And our goal there, where we see our role, is actually to facilitate the knowing more or knowing less, give consumers and guests abilities to add more if they want you to know more, and then give them the ability to tell less or remove themselves if they don't want that.
I think if you can show the consumer that you're driving value with your data, then they're more likely to opt in to provide that data to your system, right? So.
We can take one more question. I know you guys want your last pick-me-up with coffee before... Peter?
Not far at all. Obviously, a lot of this is talking about on-premises and serving in the restaurant or in the cafeteria. How much is delivery, and this may be a New York-centric point of view because delivery is so big here, but how much is people's desire to have their food brought to them, where they want it, how they want it, impacting how you're building your businesses?
It's something we think more and more about, especially as you see the rise of delivery. And I think at first it was a New York City or big city phenomenon, and now it's everywhere. We work with casual brands, Bloomin' Brands, which is Outback Steakhouse, and Carrabba's. They're one of our partners. It's not always delivery. Sometimes it's pickup. But where you're seeing is you have the same guest that's doing both now, and you see that pattern evolve once you start to have a family. If you have little kids, you don't necessarily want to go eat at the restaurant, because your 2-year-old might cause a fit. So it's more important than ever that we start to bridge that off-premise with on-premise data. And there's so many opportunities, we think, going forward for brands to get smarter about how you market or message to a guest that might only come in for delivery. You want to get them on site or vice versa. And then we think about how do we do that in a way that's direct and meaningful for the brand so they don't have to rely on a third party that might want to own their guests to do so.
Yeah, I think for us, delivery is definitely an expectation of consumers now with Uber Eats and DoorDash. It's, people are using it a lot. I think for us is really like the unit economics around delivery I think it's still questionable. I think people are trying to figure out how to make it affordable. And if you look at those services too, majority of the deliveries happen in the evening and on the weekends, right? So in our business, majority of our sales happens in the morning for breakfast and lunch, and usually it slows down in the evening. So the delivery needs are very different, right? So if you're in a hospital, nurses have 20-minute breaks. So they actually do delivery on their own today. What they do is they get one of their nurses to go down and pick up all the food for all the nurses, and they bring it up. So they're actually figuring out their own delivery solution. So now we're trying to figure out what is the right solution for us in these types of use cases. The other one is where we think delivery would really apply for our business is group ordering group delivery, because that's where the unit economics makes sense. So we have a lot of businesses actually in the rural areas because there's this urbanization that's occurring. So when we have offices or clients in rural areas, sometimes it's harder for us to find labor everywhere. So this is where the opportunity for cloud kitchens occurs, and then we can drop ship food at all these different locations. So these are some of the interesting areas for us that we're looking at for delivery.
Great. And I think we got to end. So thank you guys. That was great. Thanks, everyone.